This is Learning to Dad.
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
With Tyler Ross.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
All right, we're picking up this podcast mid-conversation because Mark and I are like vibing on our going to school in Orlando and baseball. You were a pitcher, center fielder. I was a catcher.
Mm-hmm.
So I never had to catch 92 miles an hour though.
Yeah,
so,
it's accuracy is we all know the examples of guys that couldn't throw that hard, but they could put the ball wherever they wanted it. So I think that's pitching. I wasn't pitching, I was throwing,
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah, I mean, the common thread was, I segued into mentorship and how I've been a mentor most of my life in many different capacities, and having had children that had friends who had one parent or no parents, or, that these gaps present themselves, and you kind of plug in if you're inclined, and you can change someone's life. That mentorship thing is a big deal.
I couldn't agree more. Back to baseball, a couple of the best mentors I ever had were my coaches. My basketball coach was huge. My baseball coaches were huge. Mm-hmm. And you said did you really never have any good coaches, or never any good pitching coaches?
My dad was my coach until I was 12. And so that was what we called Little League. And then you went to senior league when you were 13, which is you went from the 200-foot fence to the regular-sized baseball field, and everyone hits puberty at a different time there. I was stunted. Everyone got big, and I stayed small and went to a big field. But as soon as you got further on in your career, into school, you couldn't coach in our school system unless you were part of the school system, unless you were a teacher. So not that teachers can't make good baseball coaches, but there were a lot of good baseball coaches in my town, and none of them got to participate in the middle school and high school level of coaching. So I never had anybody write any letters to college for me. I never had anybody pull me aside and say, you're big and tall and you throw real hard, let me teach you how to pitch. But again, it's my point about that, Tyler, is just if you get lucky and you glom onto a mentor, athletic mentor, life mentor, business mentor, pay attention and put your phone down. Because if you recognize that, when I finally got a professional mentor in my mid-20s, I worked for him for 5 years, and he taught me everything there was to know about starting a staffing company, and I went off and started my own. And not only was he mentoring me, he was paying me handsomely while he was doing that. And all I had to do was return significant work ethic and capability and interest and loyalty, and those are not easy to come by, but they're simple. Anybody can provide them.
Do you feel like you were integrated with those things already? Do you feel like he drew that out of you and you wanted to give it to him?
Yeah, there were circumstances going on in life. I had gotten my girlfriend pregnant, so we were going to start a family. That changes everything. Responsibility-wise, focus-wise, drive. I was feeling a little pressure where I was living in Boston from people who love me, saying, what are you doing? What's happening? This is happening for these reasons, and you should do this, or you shouldn't do that. I'm like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go start my family on my own terms. And I was then introduced to this guy who was starting a company down in Florida, and he asked me if I wanted to help him. And we got to talking for a while, and he explained himself well. Very, very bright guy, friend of mine to this day. And but I think the way that I was raised, being a middle child, I was the negotiator, I was the mediator. Being a recruiter, you're kind of in the middle. You're negotiating on behalf of the candidate, and you're negotiating with the client. It's kind of like a sports agent for software engineers, because I picked the technology space. So yes, I think I was inclined to be a relationship guy already. I was inclined to be a communicator already, and I loved training people and helping people and serving other people. So he plugged me into all the nuance that was starting a business, hiring people, firing people, training people, banking relationships, attorney relationships, how to seek out money, just everything. And so by the time the 5 years was up and he sold the company and took off, I was left to run what was there. And I did that for a short period of time, discovered that I just don't like working for anyone else, and took my experience and the money that he'd given me upon sale, and I started my own company with a good friend of mine. And we did very well for quite a long period of time. So I think I felt like I'd found my calling. I remember feeling that way, like this is kind of what I think I was meant to do, this middleman, this negotiator on behalf of people making important decisions with their lives.
Yeah, that's an important role to play that just about everybody on the planet needs. But you talk about getting your girlfriend pregnant at 26, and you on your website, which is it's the digit 7pillarsglobal.com. You say that's about the time you woke up and started to get your shit together. I don't know if you smoked no more pot or less pot, but you think, but it's all medical, so it's like the doctor told me to do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I can come up with a number of excuses. No, I just remember I always wanted to be a dad. I didn't necessarily want to back into it the way that I did, but I have three beautiful young adult children now as a result of that. We did eventually get divorced kind of contentiously, which also taught me a bunch of other stuff and made me much closer with my kids. I got sole custody of them as my own attorney, and I'm not an attorney. So that's how crazy that situation was. And there's all kinds of tentacles to that story that maybe we do a second and third podcast about.
I'm already enjoying talking to you so much. I'll be happy to do that.
Me too, Tyler. Me too.
So, like, was it having kids that really said, you know what, I'm going to pull my head out of my ass, I'm going to start, really grinding because I need to provide this life? Or do you think it woke something up in you that just was dormant, and, you had that discipline and inspiration and passion to do something that you found? Like, what was the difference maker about then?
It's easy to look back that far and say I know. I don't know that I knew. I just remember going, all right, this is not about you anymore. This is way bigger than you. And I think that I owe my parents some gratitude about the way that they raised me. I wasn't like causing trouble or getting in trouble. I was just lost. I was just kind of like, I felt like I had too many things that I was good enough at to be able to do, and I couldn't choose what I wanted to do. And when I was introduced to recruiting, it was backing it up a little bit. I walked into when I found out my girlfriend was pregnant and I started to get serious, like immediately, like that day, I started planning. I bumped into this guy in my parents' condo. My mother's best friend got remarried to this Australian guy. And over a glass of wine, I said, I'm looking for something to do. May I ask, what do you do? And can we get that conversation just wherever it goes? Because you seem like you got it buttoned up. You do well. You're a nice guy. I would value your opinion. And he said, I'm a recruiter for petrochemical engineers on behalf of Saudi Arabian oil companies. And I said, huh? And he proceeded to tell me about this job that companies that are looking for critically skilled people that are in high demand and limited supply seek outside agencies to do the recruiting on their behalf because it's such a full-time job. And I applied to a job in the newspaper. That's how long it was ago. That Sunday, I had an interview on Monday, and they hired me on the spot. And then I worked for those guys for 3 years until I met my mentor. And the rest is history, So, I started doing my own thing pretty early on in my career, 6-7 years in, and then did that until the divorce came, which kind of blew everything up financially, professionally, personally, physically. But we persevered, and we're here today, and we're smiling, and things are okay. Things are good.
Yeah, that has to be absolutely brutal, especially if it's contentious. So I'm sorry you had to go through that. Sorry your kids had to go through that. But great to hear that you got to the other side and it turned out to be a beautiful thing. And a great relationship with all your kids, it sounds like.
Yep.
To the professional stuff, when you were thinking you had all these skills, you weren't really sure how to apply them. In today's job market, there's certainly lots of kids out there, some with more skills than others, that don't know where to start. I'm not doing anything. What should I do? Is there any advice you give to someone that's kind of on the fence on not knowing where to start?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I do. That's what my coaching is. It's and I'm, the challenge that I have, Tyler, in general, is that what I do, at least in my mind, is helpful to almost everyone. There's no age limit to it. There's no gender constraint. There's no racial constraint. There's no cultural or religious constraint. If you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, I can help you. And I don't say that. I say that with all humility. It's just all I've ever done. I even was doing it when I was a kid. I just wasn't aware that I was doing it. And so I usually get people to go, well, wait a second, before we talk about resumes and interviews and jobs and titles and industries and all that stuff, who are you? What do you want to do? Why, if you're so inclined spiritually, why did God put you on this earth? Let's get real. Because I find, Tyler, most people don't give themselves permission to have that conversation. They get caught in the river, and the tide starts taking them in a particular direction, and their guidance counselor threw them in there, or their mother and father threw them in there, or a coach threw them in there. All well-intentioned people. But, the vast majority of people aren't doing what they want to do out of college because they don't know what they want to do. And they select something, and 25 years later, they're still doing it. And usually they hit midlife and go, wait a second, man, the second half starts any minute now. I better get my shit together, and this is not what I want to do anymore. And, passion comes into play. I'm not going to be around forever comes into play. What have I been wasting my life doing? That's probably an exaggeration. So we usually have a come to Jesus conversation that encompasses, at least a good hour, and I leave them with some exercises to go do, kind of a contemplative set of exercises. Then I wrote a workbook around it that I give away to people because I was having the same conversation so often. I'm like, here, take this, give it 2 or 3 hours in quiet space with no distractions, be honest with yourself, and then let's get on the phone again and we'll talk through what that looks like. And then the second piece, which most people don't give any attention to, is what's your story? Once you figure that stuff out, how do you tell your story? Who are you? What do you do? Why should I talk to you any further? And so then we take all that soul-searching work and we start building a story. And the story is essentially the classic 3 segments. It's the elevator pitch, it's the tagline, and it's the full-blown interview story if you have 45 minutes to talk to somebody. And it's positive, and it's personally accountable, and it's concise, and it's compelling. And most people don't do any of that work. And then we start talking about the tactics. And I'm happy to say that once you get people doing that work, that it's kind of difficult work. It's not complex. It's just difficult because you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you're bumping yourself up against the reality of who you are and what the circumstances are around you. And most people don't want to do that. Most people are scared to do that.
What do you think? What do you think is the commonality that you most often see in that fear? Like what do you think is it a fear to actually get to know themselves? A fear to put themselves out there with somebody else? Like what's that barrier that each individual has that allows them to get caught up like that?
Yeah, I think that we all have these limiting beliefs. That's kind of a catchphrase, I know, but. And you get them from how you were raised, and just as a, for instance, my parents were both Depression babies, 1928 birth, right. And so they had their view of money was scarce, and so even though my father made good money, there was a frugality and a scarcity that kind of hung in the air. And I go into life with that. That's not a real healthy way to look at money if you want to make money. And then you got to play around with this idea of, is money bad? Or rich people bad? Aren't poor people more humble and nicer? Mm-hmm. Which is, it's kind of a bullshit self-argument, right? But a lot of us have it. So A lot of it's self-doubt. You know, very few of us are walking around in a confident frame of mind all the time. And if you don't unpack some of that stuff, and that's just two examples. I see there's 15 or 20 others that it would qualify as limiting beliefs, like fear of public speaking or fear of being a failure or fear of being a success. I mean, the list goes on. You've heard them all. So we get to the bottom of that. Overall, to answer your question, I would say self-doubt, and then this level of uncertainty. Like if you ask me a question about how to find a job, I could tell you every possible answer known to man, but I recognize most people can't. So when you don't know the answer to a question of importance like that, it makes you doubt yourself. It makes you uncertainty. In my mind, Tyler, is way worse than good news or bad news. If I get good news or bad news, I know what's going on. If I don't have any news at all, that uncertainty will drive you insane. So a lot of what I do is provide people with answers that they don't have answers to yet, based on my experience and observations over 35 years.
Yeah, that reminds me, I think it was Ben Crenshaw. He said when he's standing over a putt, he would rather feel sure than be right. And the confidence that comes from being sure,
Yeah.
like let's go so many of those limits, and you just execute, and it's great. So
Yep.
you've been doing this for a long time. You found success in it early, it sounds like. What are some of the characteristics? Because I could read your book, I could read everything there is to know about staffing, but I'm not going to be as good as you are at it. What are some of the characteristics you have that have helped make you great at counseling and coaching and staffing?
Yeah, no, another great question. It's funny what pops into my head, because I think authenticity is a big part of it. Like, I don't couch stuff. I wonder what I should say or how I should make someone feel, or I don't do any of that shit. So it's like, I think authenticity is probably the big one, but backing it up from that, I would say I care. I actually give a shit. And if you know anything about recruiting, it's a very transactional existence. It's resumes and job orders and interviews and closing deals, and that's not the way I did it. You know, if someone wasn't ready for me to help them, I put their information into a reminder file to call them later. Well, they're called CRM applications now, and I'd follow up in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever. And people are always going through some transition. So if they're not ready today, they're going to be ready at some point in the next couple of years. And I'm not forcing the issue. So I think the fact that I actually care about the human inside, and I have worked tirelessly to remain authentic, I think that's allowed me to gain the trust and credibility of people fairly quickly in a relative sense. Because I don't think people look at me and go, I wonder who that guy is. They're like, geez, I know exactly who that guy is real quick.
Mark, I felt that immediately, and you used the perfect word. You know, the couch. Like I thought this guy immediately is himself, and no airs about him, and I appreciate that about you already. I hope that we get to be together in person one day.
No, thank you very much. Those are very kind words. It takes a while. It took me a while. You know, to this day I still have people saying, "Mark, what are you doing? You just walk into the room. Just walk in, start talking. What are you doing? Just, you know." And so you get these little. I'm sure you know. You can't feel confident 100% of the time, every day, all day. You know, life knocks you down every once in a while, and you got to learn how to get back up. I think that's another thing that's, again, sounds cliche. I don't want to be the old guy saying how things used to be in the olden days, you know, but I don't know about you. You're not as old as I am, but you're old enough generationally to know we used to fall down. They used to just tell you to get up and rub some dirt on it, man. Stop whining. Just get up, move forward. The only way you can fail is to give up. So don't give up. Let's go. You know, and I think we're lacking some of that. Now I sound like the old guy, but I just think we are. I think that's part of what we've lost that I wish we had hung on to, and I'm trying to help certain people build it back up, and I teach that to my kids as well. There's this balance between being empathetic and compassionate and having the fortitude to be personally accountable and responsible for your own happiness and your own success. And I think we're playing around with that balance. And maybe it'll always be a balancing act. I don't know, because it's not all of one or all of the other. It's kind of both at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I love that so much. I was going to go a different direction, but now you've captured me in this one. How have you cultivated within yourself that fall down 7 times, get up 8 times, and what activities, helped you through that and helped you cultivate that in your kids?
All across the board, team sports, without question. I think that, not to get political about stuff, but everybody knows we're divided as a country. I don't care what side of that division you're on. I play a lot in this diversity, equity, and inclusion space. It seems to be, it's fading quick, but it was just stuffed into human resources and fairness and inclusivity and equity. And I say, find me a sports team where that works. Like when I'm playing pickup basketball in my teens and 20s, I don't give a shit what anybody looks like. I want the 4 other best guys, right?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work there, how could it work anywhere? I mean, you want the pilot that was a diversity hire, or the best pilot? You want the doctor who is a diversity hire, or you want the best doctor? I think it's a silly argument. I really do. But at team sports, I go to sports for all kinds of analogies because they're unforgiving. You strike out. Whose fault was that? It's your fault. You get thrown out stealing second. You don't blame anybody else. It's your fault. What could I do differently to preclude that result from happening again? Why did it happen? And how can I behave differently so it doesn't happen again? That, to me, if you respond to life like that, you're probably going to be relatively happy. And if you start looking for things and people and stuff to blame, you're going to be the old guy in his underwear with the shotgun on the rocking chair on the porch, yelling at kids to stay off your fucking lawn.
Man, we had that guy when I was a kid, the general.
Oh yeah, everybody knows that guy.
We hated the general. And I think sports is such a beautiful thing to seek analogies from, because the world that you grew up in, I'm a little bit older than your kids, but it's completely different than the world I grew up in. The world I grew up in is completely different than my kids or your future grandkids are going to grow up in. So we can't relate to the context that we're living in. But baseball, man, it's the same sport. Basketball, it's the same sport. Like, it's the one constant thing that everybody gets.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great place to pull analogies from.
I think meritocracy in general is a good system. I think, and I think we've lost sight of that we've lost sight of it in a lot of our institutions, from academia to government to, Hollywood to, they're just, it's like we preach diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we practice meritocracy. Like one of my friends says, we bring children up through the school system in socialism, and then we chuck them into capitalism, and we don't teach them anything about how to handle capitalism. I think it's a great analogy. It's true.
It really is, and I would defy someone to find a 40, 50, or 60-year-old that has the same ideas now that they had in college.
Yeah, you learn.
A lot different. Even my economics professor looked like Karl Marx. He's probably still at Rollins, right around the corner from you.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny.
Over your years of working in the same or similar profession, how have you found your perspective to change as you've matured as a human and as a professional?
I think that the contention of the divorce, while in it, I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. Having come out the other side of it, I think 2 things strike me as really things I'm proud to have gotten better at. One is humility, and the other is my ability to listen intently. And I think, your question earlier about what made me a good recruiter, I think I was always a pretty good listener. But you raised two daughters who are really capable, competent, beautiful, athletic, no messing around, and you're going to learn how to listen better. So
if you don't, the consequences are severe.
God help you. God help you.
So I have a 9-year-old daughter who is beautiful, athletic, all those things you said about your daughter, and I'm being objective, as I'm certain you are as well.
Of course.
No subjectivity to this. And I'm trying to teach her to be resilient through athletics and dance performances. Both my kids do jiu-jitsu, so they lose every day. Somebody gets them in an arm bar or chokes them, and they gotta reset and start over and learn from that mistake. But as a 9-year-old and as a father of 2 girls, what advice can you give to me if you can remember these days, if you haven't expunged them from your mind from 9 to 18? What am I looking forward to?
Yeah, well, don't pay any attention to the people tell you that, oh man, you're going to be in trouble when she turns 16. That's bullshit. I never bumped into that. I don't know if I did this on purpose, Tyler, or I did it as a result of our circumstances, but I never gaga goo-gooed my kids. I spoke to my kids respectfully. I insisted that they respect me. I didn't tolerate back talk or swearing or the Lord's name in vain or not picking up your room or not brushing your teeth. But I spoke to them respectfully, and I think a lot of parents don't do that. I didn't deny them their childhood in doing so. That's not what I mean. But they were, I remember my middle daughter coming home one day, and Winter Park, it's all full of rich people, and we were relatively well off. Daddy, so-and-so got a BMW because she got straight A's. I'd be like, cool, you want to go get some ice cream? And I don't care what somebody else got. You get your own stuff, Don't you think you're supposed to get straight A's? I mean, if you didn't get straight A's, I wouldn't be disappointed if you tried as hard as you could. But because so-and-so got a BMW, that's the last time we're having that discussion, So it's just, again, I think it's just being authentic, I expected a lot out of them, but I don't feel like I put a lot of pressure on them. I feel like they put pressure on themselves. They were self-guided. So that's some of what I would say. It sounds like you're doing the right stuff. The martial arts stuff is wonderful.
Yeah, to go back to what you're saying, my least favorite phrase that my kids utter is, "That's not fair."
Yeah.
I haven't figured out the message to them that makes them stop saying it, because they continue to say it, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing you do is, and I do this in my work as well, is self-deprecation. I'm just a dude. There's nothing special about me. I have certain things I do well, and other people have certain things they do well. There's most of the stuff out there I can't do. There's just a couple things that I can do that I do pretty well. And so I try and spend my time doing those things. And I try to pay other people to fix my plumbing and do the carpentry work required to keep my house in order and fix my car. And I mean, could I do those things? Probably, but it'd take me a week. If somebody else could do it in an hour, that's a waste of my time. So I think that recognizing what you can do, recognizing what your kids can do, and then seeing what they really enjoy doing, where those lines cross, and then just throwing gas on that fire and just being encouraging as all heck,
Yeah. At what age were your kids when you got divorced?
Well, the got divorced thing took about 10 or 11 years.
Oh, goodness.
So my son was 8, and my daughter was 14 or 15, and so my middle child would have been 10. 8, 10, and 14, 8, 10, and 15 was when it all began. And there was, domestic violence injunctions that were thrown out 3 in a row, walking through metal detectors to pick up my kid for 50-50 parenting, 7 different judges, 30 grand on copies, because I ran my own company. I wasn't a W-2 guy. So there was all kinds of creepy stuff going on. Supposedly I was doing all kinds of magic with my money, which was not the case. But yeah, and then, at some point the girls said, we're done. We're not doing this back and forth thing anymore, Dad. We're coming to live with you. And they went over there with a truck from a friend, grabbed as much stuff as they could, and they came and lived with me, which left my son alone with his mother, which was very challenging for him. And then, so it's tough to answer the question, how old were they or what happened? It's like, you got a couple weeks, let's get a microphone and a ghostwriter, man. We got a book there.
Sounds like a series of books. Goodness.
Yeah.
So what I have an agenda asking the question. What I'm getting at is, to my read on you is that you have a very masculine energy with exception. I'm not going to say exception, but with an added compassion and empathy, which I think is why I'm drawn to you immediately. But raising kids, I'm going to say, did you feel like they were in a lopsided environment without like a feminine energy or influence, or did they have that somewhere?
We had some good teachers. We had some good coaches. The volleyball coach at Winter Park High was a substantial woman, just a really wonderful, wonderful woman. We had friends. My daughters had friends whose moms kind of in a lovely way stuck their nose in things and put notes in their lunches when they spent the night over there at their house. So I had a lot of good support, and I don't know that anybody would say that I had a feminine side, but I definitely am compassionate, and I definitely recognize pretty quickly that I'm not a woman, but I have to fill this gap somehow. So I took them to the drugstore to get their first bag of tampons, and I took them and we talked about things they probably normally wouldn't talk to their father about. They talked to their mother. So I think I was a pretty good candidate to fill that role. I just did the best I could, and I tried to listen. I recognized early that they didn't want me to solve their problems. They just wanted me to be there. They wanted me to listen. They wanted to be loved, and they wanted me to be on time, because they only had one parent, and when I was late, they would freak out, man. Something's wrong with Dad. He's never late. It was stuff like that. You just kind of, I see what's going on there. I better alter my behavior a little bit and be more sensitive to that, because 2 minutes late to them is 2 hours late. Yeah. It took a couple of freakouts to figure that out. And little things like that, as you can well imagine, because you have kids, just put yourself in my position and the answers will start coming to you. And you do, like you've done, I'm sure, in your own life when hardship has come your way. You do the best you can, and if you keep trying, it's usually enough,
Absolutely. I resonate with that deeply. The trying is often enough. Even if you're getting it wrong, at least you're getting the benefit of the doubt from your friends, from your kids, from your family, and that if they give you the benefit of the doubt and accept that you're doing the best that you can communicate so much better. You clearly have a full life, work, family, more or less single parenthood. How did you balance all of that, and how did your priorities, counterbalance one another? Like, I guess you could give it in the form of your recollection or stories, or in the form of advice for somebody going through something similar.
I found, I remember when I was escorted out of my house by surprise. These guys there were two Winter Park cops. She was out in the street watching, getting a kick out of it, and they handed me a 5-page domestic violence. He has a gun. I never had a gun. He beats the dog. I never did anything but pet my dog. He's an alcoholic. He's a drug addict. Just pick a bad thing that you could say about somebody. And if you're a woman, you can get away with that, because the law is such that if a man is supposedly a threat, he needs to be taken out of the picture, which I completely support, because there's a lot of bad dudes out there doing bad things. But it was used against me. And the funniest part about that, Tyler, now it's a circular answer, so I apologize, but these two cops opened the door, and I could immediately tell they had no idea who I was. They were so surprised that I wasn't an angry asshole, and both of them just went, "Oh my gosh, I could just see it in their faces. One of the guys said, "Let me call up my chief and see if there's any other way we can do this." And I'm like, "Thanks, man." I ended up walking out with a trash bag full of like 6 pieces of clothes, and I never walked back in the house again. And so I didn't get any of the contents. I didn't get any of the house. I got royally screwed by the system, which I think is it's fine. It's fine. They looked at me. I walk into the courtroom and they were like, "This big, tall, articulate, confident guy, he doesn't need our help. We have to make sure she's okay." And she was an actress, man. She could turn it on and turn it off. So, yeah, I forgot what your question was. I went off on that tangent.
Just really about balancing all that life that got kind of thrown onto you as a result of this.
Yeah, I remember that night. That's why I started back on that night. So I'm kicked out of my house. I got nowhere to go. I've got my car and I have no possessions really. I got the clothes on my back. I went to the liquor store and I bought a bottle of scotch and I checked into a hotel and I fell asleep drinking the scotch. Then I got up the next day and I thought, well, that's not sustainable.
That's a quick realization.
So I thought to myself, and again, kudos to my parents. I remember my dad, when I questioned my religion, Catholicism, when I was about 17, he said, "No, question everything. That's how your faith will get stronger." And I'm not as concerned about you staying in this Catholic track, but later on in life, when you need something, I want you to have something to go back to. And I didn't really know what he meant until the divorce. So when I sobered up the next day, and I said, okay, what are my choices? I can go bar hopping and be that guy, the womanizer. I could also go back to church. I could also look into this yoga thing that my daughters have been talking about for a long time. I've always been an athlete, so exercising and being outside was a big thing for me. That's actually probably saved my life. Exercise probably saved my life. But I made good choices. I started going to yoga class 5 days a week. I found a Catholic church that resonated with me, where the sermons were uplifting and there was laughter and music and flowers and sunshine, because that's not always the case in the Catholic Church. It can be brimstone and fire too. But I leveled up, and I had a dog. I didn't date for 10 years. I thought to myself, there's no way I'm introducing my kids to another human being. And then I've been dating this woman for 5 years now. My kids got me to go on, I think it was Match or eHarmony back in the day. And I was just like, okay, if you guys want to help me with the profile, I guess I'm ready. Because I also was like, relationships deserve attention. It's not fair to bring someone into a relationship if you don't have the attention and the time and the energy for it. It's just not fair. I'm not doing that to somebody else. So that leveled up. I reached out to one woman, and she was on the tail end of her annual membership. I was gonna be the last date she went on, because she just wasn't having much success with it. And we met up at a coffee shop, and 5 years later we're in love. So it's she's helped a lot too. She's quite the opposite of my ex. She smiles all the time. Not a lot of baggage at all. Not a lot of unnecessary emotion. Just kind of funny, cute, smart. Likes the stuff I like to do. She likes to exercise, eat good food. We laugh a lot. And the kids are all young adults, so that same concern is not there about, they all get along fabulously. So yeah, that's it. That's it. I think I made good choices.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've been in 2 serious relationships, we'll call them. How did you personally change from the first one to the second one? Because you were a very young man in your 20s with the first one, and then clearly in adulthood and have grown children. So your life's perspective had to have shifted, in the way that you relate with people and the way that you are a partner to someone had to have shifted. What are some of those shifts?
Yeah, 26 years old and ignorant, but I still had the foundational stuff that my parents gave me. I was a good person, generally speaking. I was relatively intelligent. I was personally accountable, even though I made some bad decisions in my youth. We all do. Most guys at 26 are pretty stupid and lost anyway, in my experience. So I wasn't really unique in that sense. And then I just stepped up. I think the one thing I would say from a relationship standpoint is you can't fix somebody, and you think you can. And especially when you get initial feedback that you're helping. Like her family would say to me, she's so different since she met you, Mark. You're the best thing that's ever happened to her. Yeah, but there's also this little guy that wasn't there yet who's like, she's not going to change. You either have to accept what you got here or you got to do something else. And of course, the Catholic in me is like, I'm not getting divorced. There's no way I'm getting divorced. This is for life. This is for good, for better or for worse. So that was a little naive. I see a lot of guys actually that get involved early with a woman and they never sat down and taught, okay, this is going to be serious. You want this to be serious? All right, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about money. Let's talk about religion. Let's talk about kids. Let's talk about public or private education. Let's talk about politics. I mean, let's talk about them all, and let's understand if there's 15 things on the list, if we agree about 10 of them and we can compromise on the other 5, we're good. But this is the time to have that discussion, right? Let's not hide behind any of these things. Otherwise, they're going to kick us in the ass later on. They're coming. It's just a question of whether we want to address them now. Flipping forward to my current relationship, I mean, you don't have to worry about all the stuff you got to worry about when you're young. There's no getting pregnant. There's no kids. There's no, you've already bitten off a chunk of life. My girlfriend's husband just dropped dead on her in his 40s, just without warning at all. So we both have this loss. Hers is gone. Mine's still floating around in the ether and pokes her head in every once in a while just to piss me off. There's such an ease. My girlfriend has her own house. I have my own house. One of my friends actually was talking to her at a cocktail party, and I was overhearing it because I was in close proximity. I wasn't getting nosy, but he said to her, why do you think you and Mark get along so well? She didn't hesitate. She goes, we don't live together. So I don't know where that's going. Marriage has not really come up once or twice, maybe just kind of laughing about it. I don't think she feels compelled to get married. I certainly don't. That doesn't mean that won't change over the next few years. Maybe there's some comfort in that for both of us later on. But it's, we got a good thing going. It seems to work well for both of us. But I'm also far more authentic than I was in my 20s because I'm not worried about being liked anymore. I'm not worried about being right anymore. I'm not worried about what someone else is going to think about me. So most of the stuff that comes out of my mouth is pretty authentic, and that's easier for the other person to deal with. There's less guessing, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I think saying what you mean and meaning what you say goes a really long way, even if it's not received in the best light. At least it's honest and you're getting real feedback. It's like when you call somebody and they don't call you back, and it's like, I'd rather you call me and tell me to fuck off than just give me the silent treatment.
Totally. Yeah, totally. But things like, your vanity as well. It's like I can walk around the house if it's just the two of us with nothing on or fully clothed, and it doesn't matter. There's no judgment. There's no like, oh, I need to look like this or I need to look like that. There's just such an ease with it. It's not like we don't have the occasional disagreement or something, but it's like, I don't know. It's like there's no agenda. It just is. It's good,
That's so cool. I've been married almost 11 years now, and let's see, that means I was 29 when we got married, 28, 29, and I'm a different person now, 12 years later, and she's a different person now, and we had a conversation recently where she's like, I don't know if you I know you love me, but I don't know if you like me that much. It's like, well, I kind of feel the same way, but it's like, we're going to be different. As we're going to be different now than we are in 10 more years. So like,
my experience with that, and it's different because I got, I filed for divorce, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I didn't feel like I had any options. It was just the kids were getting crushed emotionally, and she was not interested at all in their well-being. She just wanted to hurt me, and she would use them to do that, which is, it's kind of unique. most people that get divorced are like, yeah, I get why you don't like her and she doesn't like you, but you both seem to be operating with the interests of the children at the very least, with the exception of maybe you shouldn't argue in front of them every once in a while. You don't do it that often. This was completely different. Everyone looked at us and goes, I don't even get why she's doing that to him because he seems like a nice guy, but I don't have any idea why this is happening because this is just evil. This is just bad. And what made me think about it is I don't know a whole lot of couples, and I have the hindsight now of being 62. I can look back on these things. It's kind of an unfair advantage. You always, I think you're at the, and I don't mean to presume anything, but based on what you said, it's like 10 to 15 years in is when it gets challenging by observation from my perspective, looking at, 10 or 15 other couples that have been in that space, good friends of mine. And one of two things happens. It breaks the marriage down or it makes the marriage stronger. And I think that the people that get stronger are the people that say, I'm in this. I'm not going to get out of this just because it feels difficult. I'm going to investigate. I'm going to observe. I'm going to listen. I'm going to research. I'm going to try. If you don't give that period of time, whenever it is, and it's usually for a couple of years, and it usually involves your parents getting sick or infirm or Alzheimer's, something comes in from the outside that goes, you can't have any of my attention anymore. We're not having sex anymore on a regular basis. I got to deal with this crap over here. Wait for me. I'll be back. But no one articulates that. They just do it. I watched a friend of mine, his parents got ill and one of them died 6 weeks after the other one. And for the year or two prior to that, he was struggling with his marriage. And it was only because all of their attention was going to his parents. They had no attention for each other. They gave each other no time. And now they look happy as pigs in shit. It's like the perfect marriage because they waded through that muck. They didn't give up, That's what I see anyway.
Dude, you do like middle of the target for me, except instead of some familial thing, it was a business. I was put into a circumstance where I had to make a really difficult choice professionally, and it involved basically some friendships running their course and me having to throw myself into this martial arts school. And I was basically a non-factor for 4 or 5 months between depression and having to just be there constantly. So that externality that you speak of is dead on. Now that we're on the other side of it, we communicated through all the hard stuff, and I think it's bringing us closer together. Like presently, we're getting happier every single day.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, that's a cycle I've seen a lot of, and I was never given the opportunity to fight through. But I think sometimes I could have done something differently. But I've had too many people, including all 3 of my children, say, "No, Dad." I have one friend of mine say, I said to him one day, "I just wish I could forgive her. I think I should be able to forgive her now." And he started laughing. He's like, "Dude, what you went through, don't rush that. Okay, take your time with that."
That's just nice to have a little permission for
it
that.
It is. Yeah.
So, talking about, talk about kids and your being a dad. How do you think your role as a dad changed over the last, say, 30 years or so? Clearly they were in your house, taking them to school, picking them up from school, and now it's a different role. How would you describe that evolution?
Yeah, it's when you're playing mom and dad for teenagers and single digit kids, all of whom were really good athletes, all of whom had varied interests, from music to civics, government office in school, to dance. My girls, when they moved from dance to volleyball, I said a prayer, because sitting around a dance studio is brutal, but watching high level volleyball is fun.
It's awesome.
I'm going to 3 different facilities, 3 different schools, dropping them off, picking them up, making their meals, cooking dinner for them, doing the laundry. I'm doing everything. I never complained about it because I love being a dad. I'm like, this is just your reality, dude. Just show up and shut up, and and then later on now they don't need me anymore. They just want me around, which is very flattering to me. I'm very grateful for that. And because of what I do, both as an entrepreneur, having built and sold a couple businesses and made all the mistakes that go into that, particularly the first experience, they lean on me for life. They lean on me for business. My middle daughter is killing it in the nutrition space right now online. And she's growing into pains. She's growing into terminating employees. She's growing into, I need a lawyer. I need a banker. I need an accountant. I need cash flow reporting and P&Ls. And I need, Dad, what do I do about this? And how do I handle that? So it's really cool being that guy for your kids. And then the girls are, they're, I don't know how to say it. They're confused about, do I want to work and be successful? Do I want to get married and have kids? What's a man supposed to be like? And what we're doing to our men right now, emasculating them, for lack of a better phrase, is just confusing everybody. It's like being a woman's really cool. Being feminine's really cool. You can also be sharp and tough and have fortitude and still be feminine. But, the guy's role is to protect and to provide. And if you think that's toxic, good luck. Good luck. So I see young people, so let's say 25 to 35, just really confused about that kind of stuff. And my girls are right there. They've had a relationship here or there, but the way that they talk about it, and I'd say this in front of them, I'm not saying anything that I wouldn't want them to hear, even if they were to disagree with me. I just see, when I was young, it was pretty straightforward. It was, this is a man and this is a woman. And there are slight differences. Some men have more masculine energy than others. Some men have more feminine energy than others. But at the end of the day, you take it all the way back to the caveman. I'm going out and getting the food, and you're taking care of the kids. And I'd like a meal when I get home, and we'll have a couple of kids. And when the lion comes to the door, I'll get him with the spear, and you take the kids in the back, and I'll protect you, I'll save you, and I'll make sure that you never go hungry. And people think that's changed. I don't think so. I think we're doing a lot of stuff right now that we're trying to defy human nature, and I think we should knock it off, And I love the opportunities my girls have. I love how tough they are. I love how feminine they are. I love how capable they are. But I also want them to find a man that will support them and protect them, and whether they need it or not, or whether they think they need it or not. It's just a male without that quality is a less attractive male, and I just think that's true. I just don't think there's any way around that. I think we should stop fighting that.
Yeah, I agree with you so much, and I try, I appreciate everybody and everything for their individuality and the rest. But
Sure.
I'm so grateful to have what's basically a traditional household where my wife stays home with the kids and where I get to go out and, spear the lion. And I think that balance works really well for our kids. I think it sees the perspective in a really well-rounded way. And if you're not resilient, if you're not tough, if you can't protect yourself, what good are you to anyone else? I think there's two kinds of people, producers and consumers. And if you can't protect yourself, you can't produce. If you can't protect others, you can't produce. Then you're just consuming the protection of others. And I think that's bad for everyone.
It is bad for everyone. It's not selfish. It's, to your point, I think in order to take care of other people, you got to take care of yourself first. And you got to love yourself before you can love somebody else too. Their stuff is cliched for a reason, because it's true. It works it stands the test of time, Yeah,
you're very right. So we're bumping in close to an hour, which is awesome. I love talking to you, Mark. We may have to do this again. But I want to hit you with a couple kind of rapid fire questions. So You start with maybe an easy one, like fictional dads, like books, movies, television shows. Is there ever a fictional dad that you've seen that you thought was just the coolest?
Oh man, that's a good question. I just love my dad and respect my dad so much. I got a mental block going on. There's nobody close to him.
That's awesome.
I was just
what
with
made
him.
him that way to you?
So he was from a family of 11, and Irish Catholic upbringing. Bunch of athletes in the family, priests, lawyers, pretty eclectic. His mother and father loved him. His mother, in particular, was he idolized his mother, and he became, even though he wasn't the eldest or the youngest, he became the foundation of the family. He helped everybody above him and below him. I think, one of the first ones to go to college, although he didn't finish. The Navy came around saying, "Who wants to be a fighter pilot?" And he said, "I'm out of here. Let's go," because that's all he ever wanted to do. And being a fighter pilot's a big deal. So there's a lot of authority and fortitude and capability and masculinity, and there's a lot there too. And so it's difficult. And his faith, he's got the strongest faith of anybody I've ever met. He goes to church every day. He says the rosary before Mass every day. He's a Eucharistic minister. Dude, he's 95 years old. He gave the keynote speech at the Memorial Day festivities in downtown.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and he's to your point earlier about how to advice on raising your kids. He lived it. His actions were always consistent with his words. He was never contradictory with regard to what he said and what he did, and that makes life easier for a kid. That's the hardest thing my kids went through, is they'd hear something from their mom and they'd hear something different from their dad, and you can't do that to kids. So I can't come up with a fictional one, man. I idolized Clint Eastwood when I was, but not because he was a good dad. He was a philanderer. He was just a cool dude. Dwight Evans, the Boston Red Sox right fielder, I idolized him growing up. Not because he was a dad, and I don't even know if he was a dad or a good dad or a bad dad. And then there was Ted Williams. All sport. Ted Williams was a horrible father. He sacrificed everything to be the best hitter that ever played the game. And people can teach you what not to be like too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some of the best role models in my life have been people that told me or showed me what not to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so funny. The best compliment I've ever received and the worst thing anyone's ever said to me is the same exact thing. You're just like your dad. The intent behind it
Yes.
vary dramatically.
Yeah, that can be a double-edged sword, can't it?
Yeah. So what are 2 or 3 characteristics you think every father has to have? A super dad has these 3 characteristics.
Certainly patience. I think that's a handy tool in life, but with children it's especially important. I think authenticity. I always told my kids when they'd come to me and say, "I don't know what to believe, Dad. I'm hearing different things from different people," and I'd say, "Look, it's worked for me. It's pretty simple. It's not always easy, but look at what people do and listen to what they say. And when those things are the same, you find integrity. And when those things are different, that's when you have to start questioning who's telling you the truth. So just look for that. I don't care if it's a teacher, a parent, me, your mom, your grandfather, a coach, same thing. Look for where those two things intersect, what you do and what you say. And then, I leaned on listening a lot. I've listened to a lot of stuff. And being a sales guy and a confident guy, I like to talk. So it's challenging for me, maybe more so than the average guy, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's challenging for everybody. But when you can ask a question and just shut up and intently listen to the response, that comes in handy. Because I'll tell you, Tyler, you probably know this already. They see everything you do and they hear everything you say, even when you don't think they're listening or you don't think they're looking.
Yeah. That's I try to act as though my kids are right on my hip at all times.
Mm-hmm.
So when in your life do you feel the most love?
In the presence of my friends and family, and when I specifically close my eyes, and I try to do this a few times a day, more pointedly in the morning, and I connect with God in my own way, and I express my gratitude to Him, my appreciation, my talents, my gifts, and there's so many things in this spirituality space that are kind of the same. They come from different tomes and different religions, but the good stuff's all the same, and it's like, thank you, God. I couldn't do this without you. Take all my shit today, please, and I'll come back and we'll have a conversation in the morning, but I'm going to leave the rest of the day up to you, and that'll help me do the right thing all day. So that's pretty, I've really kind of rolled into a deep, authentic spirituality over the last few years, and that makes me feel very loved and grateful.
If time and space and money were no object, if there was a gift that you could give to every dad on the planet, space, time, money is meaningless. You can have it all, it's all available to you. You can snap your fingers and give it to every dad on the planet. What's a gift that you would love for everyone to have?
It sounds so arrogant, but I would say some quiet time with me. Let's talk about life. Let's just talk about life, because I'm pretty good at that, and part of it's because I really like it, and part of it's because I had some really good examples. That I joke with people all the time. Plagiarism is only bad in school. It's really good in life, because everything I know, I learned from somebody else. So I love serving people. I love helping people. I love, like you said to me right out of the gate, I love talking to you, Mark. I felt like I automatically knew who you were. I think I have a responsibility because of that to get that in front of as many people as I possibly can. And that's what I'm trying to figure out for the rest of my life.
Well, that's a beautiful answer and a perfect segue for me to throw to you to tell me where people could find you, whether it's a website, a social media handle, whatever it is. How do people find you and connect?
Yeah, so my last name is Aylward, and so I think my LinkedIn profile is the LinkedIn URL /Aylward Mark. You can find everything about me from there. Everything I have is connected to that purposefully. The other two probably interesting links, which you can find from my LinkedIn profile, are what you alluded to earlier. The number 7 and then Pillars, Pillars Global, 7pillarsglobal.com. That also, I've redirected my domain, my markaylward.com domain to that site. So if you typed in markaylward.com, you'd end up on the 7 Pillars site. And then my YouTube channel, I think that's also Aylward Mark, but you can find it from a link to LinkedIn. I've made a lot of good videos with some pretty good content around how to find work, how to interview, how to negotiate, how to get a raise. If it's movement forward professionally, you probably could jump down that YouTube rabbit hole of mine and go, for nothing, for free. I learned a lot from Mark. I'm going to watch more of his stuff. So I think that if you're in transition, you might want to go there too. But you can get everything you need from my LinkedIn profile. I've written 150 articles there. I've done a bunch of I'm doing a series right now of videos called The Wisdom of Rock and Roll, where I'm taking rock and roll titles. Like I just did Simple Man, Leonard Skinner, and the last one, I've got 5 more to do, but the second one was Communication Breakdown. It's amazing how rock and roll titles fit right into life lessons and professional lessons. I even say it in one of these videos that some of these guys were like 20-something, 30-something years old, singing about wise stuff, stuff I didn't know when I was that age. So I'm kind of having fun with that. It's pretty authentic stuff. It's pretty short, easy to consume. But that's where I'd go if you're interested in seeing more about me.
Awesome. Well, I'll wrap this up with one last question. In the event that this recording lasts long enough to reach generations of your family, great grandchildren, what's a message you would love to share with them?
Steal it from my dad. Keep it simple. Life is not as complex as we would like to think that it is. It's very, do the right thing, do what you say you're going to do. If you can't do it, don't say you're going to do it. Keep it simple. 90% of the stuff that you worry about never takes place. So stop that. And, yesterday is yesterday. You're done, man. It's today. The extent to which you can live in the moment in which you're in right now is the extent to which you will be happy. I'm 100% convinced of that. How to do it? Practice. Good luck with that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, Tyler, my pleasure. You're a great interviewer. You ask great questions, and I love your demeanor and your tone, and you listen very well.